Welcome back. It is March 19th of 2026 and I am currently at the place that I'll be living for the next 6 months, and I figure before I start yapping I ought to kind of show you where it is that I'm living, because the last time I ever did one of these check-ins was June of 2024. I just sat in my room and watched that video to kind of get a recap of, the things I talked about then and where I was at, mentally, and just all the things. So it was really interesting watching that video and kind of starting to get ideas for this. And frankly, I've been wanting to do one of these check-ins for a very long time. And it's kind of crazy to think that the last one I did was June of 2024, and now we are in March of 2026. So it's about time I caught up and kind of just gave myself some time to intentionally stop working, stop moving, and just sit, process, and speak. But like I said, before we do that, I gotta close my door, but I will also show you this is where I will be living. I'm on an island in northern Minnesota, way up near Canada, actually. I'll give you a little tour quick too. This is the room that I will be living, and I'll explain how in the heck I ended up here and live on an island, because it's a very interesting story. But let's close the door, get back outside. I'll get you set back up here. Cool. So I kind of was thinking how to go about this and through this. And I think I'm gonna kind of reference my phone a little bit here and there, just in different images and stuff I have, to at least give me an idea of the different things that have happened. And I think what I'm going to do is kind of go month to month from the very last check-in video I did, which was, as I said, June of 2024. So I guess let me scroll back in my phone to June of 2024. So I had just made a YouTube video in June of 2024 announcing that I was going to be uploading my series from the time that I spent in Sierra Leone in West Africa in 2024, running the last Walk for a Child event, which was a 180-mile hike from the capital of Liberia, which is Monrovia, all the way back up to the southern city of Bo in Sierra Leone. One of my best friends, Matthew Sweetman, joined me on that experience, and it was his first time in Africa. And he had known I've been doing this Walk for a Child project for a long time, and I'll probably explain a little more at some point what exactly that is, because I do have plans for next year to get that program back going. But the last video I made in June of 2024 was to pretty much say, hey, I finished editing everything, I'm gonna release the series, plus do a little check-in. So looking back on that time, a lot of stuff started to really change right after that. So 4th of July weekend of 2024, I went to New York City. I've mentioned her before in previous videos, but one of my best friends is this girl by the name of Carlene, who I met in college. We've traveled a bunch together. I think we have connected very much because we're both very creatively minded and have very strong, passionate, creative outlets in our various own ways. But one of the things I've done over the years with my music project is run this series called Manatee and Friends. And I've done them, I think I've done 3 now. Yeah, I think I've done 3. I maybe have done 4, but 3 that I can think of for sure. maybe 4. But the first one was years ago, back in 2021. I did one in Milwaukee, and it just happened to be that it was like an out-of-state show because I am from the Twin Cities of Minnesota. And then I didn't do another one until 2024 when me and Carlene had the idea to do one in New York City. And really what we ended up doing is she kind of gathered some artists. We ended up getting speaker equipment for free. And we just went to a park right on, I believe that's the Hudson River in New York City. And we just DJ'd. It really wasn't anything fancy. I had a couple other DJs play. I ended up having the cops show up and try to shut us down, which was really interesting. But yeah, it was one of those where it was very much like a complete shot in the dark. Yes, it wasn't any crazy official show like it was at a venue or anything like that, but it was just really neat to set a goal, go through all the process of fine-tuning all the logistics for that goal, and then actually going in like executing it. That was really, really cool. And overall, I thought it was a really fun, exciting, successful event. Like I said, wasn't really anyone there. It's just the people that DJ'd and a couple friends, and she's very involved in the shuffle community out there. And so we had different friends from her shuffle community join. But something happened that weekend in New York City. We, did the show. I also got to see the world famous hot dog eating competition that happens every 4th of July at, I believe it's Coney Island. And it was like the craziest, I feel like most American thing I've experienced, where you get off the train at Coney Island, you walk down the steps, there's just thousands of people, tons of them. And it smells like weed, and it smells like hot dogs. And I'm like, man, this is America. It was just an incredible thing to see, experience, be on the beach. But what happened that weekend was something in me shifted. Up to that point, I was working a job for a logistics company. And, I think I just tried to cover and lie to myself ultimately that like, no, things will get better, more opportunity will come. And it just like never did. I think one of the nails in the coffin, and I'm careful with how I talk about this and say this because I am very grateful for my coworkers who I worked with, and even my boss, who I've mentioned in past videos, who, around the same age as me and has found a lot of success in that industry of freight brokeraging. But the guy who was like the quote-unquote owner of the company never showed up to work. When he did come in, it was very like manic. Like, truthfully, I think he was dealing with addiction issues, mental health issues, what have you, crazy stuff. But this guy who owned the company, he was on commission for every single one of the deals that we did. And so my coworkers were on, I want to say 15% commission. So every single deal that they did, they got 15% commission of that, where I was at 10. And it was split up between 10% commission to me, 5% to my coworker, the kid the same age as me, and then 5% to the owner, or 10%. I don't know how it was. But my coworker decided to give up his 5% that he was getting from my deals because he wanted me to be at 15% or whatever the number was. And the owner of the company told my coworker, no, I'm going to take that 5%. And so to me, it was one of those moments where like I had invested so much time and energy and really, really tried my best at that job to be successful. And like anything, I mean, that was my first professional job ever, like office professional job. I had no idea what the hell I was getting myself into. I figured out kind of how things worked, but as much as you could within a year or so. But to have the quote-unquote owner of the company who didn't show up, who never expressed any interest, or even like, hey, thanks, you're doing a good job. And I'm very, I'll get to this a little later, but I am very much a words of affirmation kind of person, where I need sometimes that reassurance and just like a simple thank you, you're doing a good job. Never said. Just felt very underappreciated, and financially I was really struggling. Partially during that time I was spending on things that I shouldn't have been spending, or going out and things like that. But it's like, when I really look back on it, I wasn't doing anything crazy or going out like spending ridiculous amounts of money. I just was not making any money, and I was doing the same job as my coworkers, and they were making, I'm telling you, like 5 to 10 times, maybe not 10, but 3, 4, 5, 6 times the amount that I was making, and I was doing arguably the exact same job. So in New York City, I get back after that trip, and every time I go in New York City, I love it. I think New York City is one of the greatest places on earth. I also feel like there's a ton of creative energy in New York City, and I feel it every time I'm there. I just really like feel that energy. And so I got back and I'm like, fuck this job. Like, I'm out. Like, I am gonna figure out something else. I don't know what it is, but I'm gonna get my resume up to date. I'm just gonna start applying for everything, anything, all over. So I started applying to jobs in the logistics industry. I started applying to jobs in New York City because I was like, God, New York would be so cool to live in. Advertising, marketing, this, that, and the other thing. You know, and if you are any age or a young person, especially I would say in America, the whole like game of applying online through like Indeed or LinkedIn or things like that is a very like brutal game and experience. You know, I have a lot of friends who have gone in waves of really trying to apply for new jobs, getting denied, getting denied, getting denied, maybe an interview, getting denied, and it's just like, I think it's two things. I think one, yes, I do think it is hard to get hired and find a job in the current times that we're in, especially now 2026. But I also think that, like anything, there's a lot of ways to do one single thing, and the whole just applying online on these like job board websites, I don't really think that's how you really get a job, which ties me into how I ended up here. I was sitting in the office at the logistics job, click-clacking away, 45 hours a week, which realistically we sometimes did 20 to 25, and then we would just sit there, but that's besides the point. And I Googled Alaska jobs, and from that Google search, I was led to this website called Coolworks. Coolworks is like a job board posting site that kind of has various different seasonal work and more like resorts, hospitality, things like that. So the first job I applied for was this position at a resort in Alaska, in some state park up there. I forget where it was, but it's, Camp Denali, in Denali National Park. That's where it was. And it was a fly-in resort. And they were looking for like a head of like marketing. And I was like, I do social media, I do all my own content, I've been doing it for a couple of years, this would be great. So I applied, they did respond, and they just said, like, you need resort experience or resort management experience. And I was like, okay, that's fair. Never worked at a resort in my life. The most hospitality thing I had done is maybe worked in the service industry at restaurants. But then I realized on Coolworks you could sort the job postings by state. And so I started looking at all the jobs in Alaska, and I started looking at jobs in other states, and then I started looking at jobs in Minnesota, and I came across this job called Ludlow's Island Resort up on Lake Vermilion. And if you don't know where Lake Vermilion is, I said it a little earlier, but it's up in the northeast region of the state. It's about 3.5 hours from the Twin Cities. It's a massive, massive lake. It's about 40 miles wide, and it has like 360 plus islands. It's a very unique part of the world. And I've traveled a little bit, not a crazy amount, but I've been, 14 countries. There'll be 15 here next month. And of those 15 countries, I still think this, especially like May through October, this is like arguably one of the best places on earth. It's so incredible. And so I see this job posting, I apply, And it pretty much went like this. Find the job posting, find the email, send an email on a Thursday afternoon, get a response on a Friday, talk to one of the guys who worked here whose family used to own it, and then I talked to the new owner of the resort on that Friday. I think that night I played a show up in St. Cloud, and my parents came with, and I told them about the idea. I'm like, wow, I'm thinking about maybe just quitting my job and going to work on Lake Vermilion. You know, and the job posting was essentially being guest services. Meaning, truthfully, at the time, I didn't know. I was like, guest services. It sounds like we're gonna just be like helping guests have a good experience at the island, which in reality is what we do. But I thought it over for the weekend, and on that Monday, I go in and I put in my 2 weeks. So I apply on Thursday, talk to the people on Friday, put in my 2 weeks on Monday, and I would say about 2.5, 3 weeks later, I packed up my entire life and I moved up north. During this time also was 2024 was a weird time where I felt in a very weird spot mentally. I felt very disconnected from my friends, my friend group, just kind of consistently having difficult days. And I also felt the use of substance, alcohol, was kind of getting to be a bit too much and having like a negative impact on my life. And so I kind of wanted partially to rip off the Band-Aid and get the hell out of town, you know, and escape all that. I'll tie back into this year because what I have found, which is interesting, is those things didn't necessarily leave. They somewhat followed, or the habits or the tendencies and things like that. But identifying them and then taking steps and strides to, you know, put those flames out as they're smoldering before they become forest fires is kind of where my mindset has been at lately. But before I get there, I get up to Ludlows in fall of 2024. I really don't know what to expect. I show up on the South Shore, which is right across from where I'm sitting right now, and it's an island resort. So you bring all your stuff over by boat, and we have these like little small work boats, 20 horsepower. Never driven a boat in my life. Have no idea what the hell I'm doing. Bring my stuff up to employee housing. I get changed into the uniform they give me. Granted, I got here like probably 10, 11 a.m. And then I came down and I worked for the next 10, 11 hours. And then the next day I woke up and started at 7 and I worked till about 9 or 10 p.m. And I did that for about 6 days straight. And I was like, wow, so this is what we do up here. We grind, like absolutely grind, which I thought was great. I was like, I really like this, because you wake up in the morning, you come down, shit, by 10 o'clock in the morning, you got like 10,000 steps. By the end of the day, you got between 25 and 30, sometimes 35,000 steps. And if you know anything about me, I love walking, I love getting my steps, so it was perfect. Plus, the little bit of time that I did have left at the end of every single day, that is where I had no option, or I had no time, free time, other than to, you have 1 hour before you gotta sleep and get up tomorrow and work 14 hours. Spend that 1 hour very intentionally, very focused, working on music. So with moving up here, part of my intention and my goal of moving up here was to, again, get away from the cities, get away from the distractions, get away from different things like substance that I feel like was starting to have a negative impact on my life. And honestly, one of the biggest motivations to get up here was to have time to work on music. Because in 2024, it's kind of went like, 2023 I released my first EP, 2024 I released an EP, 2025, we're not there yet. Yeah, 2023 I released an EP, and then 2024 I released an EP as well, but all that music was made in 2023. So, sorry, I'm just thinking out loud here. 2023 was a lot of focusing on Manatee music. 2024, especially the beginning of the year, was focusing a lot on video editing. And honestly, since I've started these projects. I would say 2020, music was a little before then, but it has constantly been this battle and back and forth of I'm working a lot, long hours at any job, whatever it is, and any free time I have, I am using for my music project or my media project, and trying to find a balance between those two has been difficult. I still have not really figured out a very solid system, and it's been 5+ years, you know, but also having some grace on myself in figuring out those processes is only beneficial, because I tend to be very hard on myself and sometimes mean, but that's besides the point. Let me try to think where I am, because I think I'm losing my train of thought. When I moved up here. So when I moved up here, so let me tie back to New York. So New York is when the inspiration came to make a change in my life, get a new job, move. I also started in the airport in New Jersey on my way out of New York City. I started a remix, my first ever remix. I didn't know how to write remixes, but it was one of my goals of 2024. After releasing 2 original EPs, about 9 tracks total, I was like, I want to figure out how to do remixes. Plus, at the time, within the electronic dance music, bass music specifically, industry, remixes were huge, and they were really popular, and they were gaining a lot of traction for artists who were doing them consistently. So I was like, shit, let me throw my hat in the ring, see what we can do. And so I wrote a remix of a popular song, which was called Noxious by Liney. And I got up here towards the end of August to Ludlow's. In September, I had released that song. And like a lot of my songs, when I first started releasing music, I would be, honestly, if the song hit 100 streams, I was like, oh, that is awesome. And frankly, still, if it hits 100 streams, dude, I'm excited. I don't really measure the success of my music based off of the analytics and metrics, even though it's obviously an important part, because it's, at the end of the day, a business and streams and stuff matter. But for the longest time, it was like, if I hit 100 streams, I was like, that's crazy. What I didn't know at the time is that this kind of run of releases starting in September of 2024, which kind of ran all the way through July of 2025, I made a jump from 100 streams, was like huge, to I have 3 songs now that have over 50,000 streams each. I have 1 song that's almost to 75,000 streams, which is insane. Like, saying that, it's like, I just had this thought the other day where, you know, and I'll get to this, where I feel kind of out of touch with my music and my craft as of lately, but if I were to be able to have like 2020 Dustin sit here next to me and be like, oh, I'm really stressed because, you know, I haven't written music in like a month, and I'm not consistently releasing a song a month, 2020 Dustin would be like, we have music out? Like, you actually figured out how to write a song? And it's like, oh yeah, let's have a little grace there of the process, sure, the process and the progress that has been made in learning how to produce music and produce high quality music, and also it reaching a wide audience, you know? So to tie back, September of 2024, I come up here. Another big draw of me being up here at Ludlow's was living here on the island. You get free housing. Again, as I said, at the logistics job, I think I was being shafted. I think I was being very underpaid. I think that I was getting the short end of the stick. And that's not me complaining by any means. You know, when it comes to jobs and employment and things like that, I look first and foremost for opportunity. If you want to continue paying me more and more money, that's fine, but I want opportunity. I want to learn. I want to continue growing my skills. Of course, I think the money will follow the more and more I push for those types of things. So, but the logistics jobs, I think I got fucked. Plain simple. I get up here and I have no rent. So that alone is roughly about $700 to $1,000 a month. And especially now being in 2026, I don't really think you can live anywhere that's not roughly $1,000 a month in rent. So I get up here, I'm doing these long hours doing guest services, and this resort is gorgeous. It's also very, very expensive. I always joke with my friends that I will never be able to afford to come here as a guest because it's expensive. It's just what it is. What separates us here at Ludlow's is the service that we provide. When you show up on the South Shore, it's very like, we use the term white glove service, but essentially like you can come here and not even lift a finger and we will just like cater to you. We take all your luggage from the South Shore or bring it to your cabin. You know, we're just very, very service focused, and we try to go above and beyond, which I love that kind of stuff. And you know, the guy I worked for when I first got up here, his name was Michael, and he always preached the little things. It's all about the little things. And I'm a big believer in that myself, and it's totally different industries, but to tie to it, it's like when I make music and I produce my songs, I have a certain process I go through when the song is finished, and then I go through what I consider my mix down process. And I always say it's like going through my song with like a fine-tooth comb, going through every single track and fine-tuning every little piece. I always use the analogy of, if I was a sculptor, it's like I'm going through every little crevice, every little crack, and just smoothing out the edges. I don't know if that's the right way to do it. That's just my process. But again, it has seemed to work because my tracks have, you know, in the last year and a half, done really well. Got lots of streams. People like it. And it's brought me a lot of growth in the music side. But September of 2024, I'm up here. I make the most money in a single month that I'd ever made in my entire life. It was crazy. And like I said, I was struggling financially at the logistics job. I also was under, and still am now in 2026, under a decent chunk of credit card debt. I have found ways to kind of manage it better, and after this year I am really confident that I will be completely out of debt. But as I usually do, I have a kind of weak point for investing into myself, especially if I get any chunk of, you know, coin, get a little bit of coin in my pocket. I'm like, should I pay down my debt or should I invest in something for Dustin? And of course, I'm going to always invest in stuff for myself because shit, I deserve it, you know? And I always think there's a net positive return in investing in myself. And again, I've had different conversations with friends. The partner that I had in the recent times, which I'll talk a little bit about, we would butt heads a lot on, you know, financial decisions and things like that. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think some of the ways I've gone about my financial decisions would look to most people as not smart. But I also look at all the things I've done, all the places I've traveled, and all the skills I've learned throughout my 20s. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. And if it came at the cost of, you know, maybe finding myself in a little bit of debt and financial trouble, I would argue that it's justifiable, and I learned a lot out of that experience, and hopefully won't find myself in it again. But again, it's what I always consider risk adversity. And I took kind of an oath or a promise to myself when I graduated college in 2020. I had told myself that I want to do as much as I possibly could over the next 4 years, over the next forever, to put myself intentionally in positions of high levels of discomfort. What does that look like? Well, I think it looks like kind of the things I've done over the last couple of years, and really pushing myself outside my comfort zone, and intentionally and consistently doing so through the travels that I've done, to the parts of the world I have, to the different projects I take on, to the different skills I learn, learning how to produce music, learning how to edit videos, learning how to create content, building an organization in a foreign third world country. finding different jobs, different skill sets, all those things, training for a marathon, hiking 1,000 miles in West Africa, solo traveling and crossing the border between India and Pakistan. It's just, if I see something that seems, one, I don't know anyone else that has done it, and two, kind of like, well, that's a crazy thing, you can bet your ass I'm going to do it, because it's uncomfortable, and the growth that comes from that, I always think, is just so valuable. So, let us get back, because I keep going off track, but hopefully this has been somewhat easy to follow. And again, this has been something I've wanted to do for a long time, so it's not really for anyone other than myself to be able to just reflect and really think through the last like 18 months. So September ends and we get to October, and when I moved up here to Ludlows, I didn't really know what came next, because it's a seasonal resort. It shuts down pretty much mid-October up until the beginning of May. It's just too damn cold up here to keep things open. It's not really a very popular travel to lake in the winter. There is ice fishing, but it's not super popular. The big thing up here is snowmobiling. But to run a resort in the winter with the cabins that we have and just how cold it gets, it wouldn't work. So I was kind of thinking, maybe we'll just stay up here in the winter of 2024 and 2025 and just work on music and maybe get a job at like some local place or whatever. Well, 6 weeks into the job here at Ludlows, the people that own this resort also own a commercial real estate business, and that commercial real estate business, they are brokers on golf course and resort transactions. That's their niche. How does this come into play? They were the brokers on this deal, but then they chose to purchase the resort. So that's kind of how this came to be. And I didn't, again, when I got here, I'm like, I don't understand anything that's going on, but I know how to work hard, I know how to follow direction, and I know that I really want to learn. And ultimately, my goal coming here, I think I've said probably like 5 things. I came up here to do this and this and this and this, and as you can see, I'm goal-oriented, but sometimes too damn goal-oriented, where I got a billion things going on, and it gets to be too much, which is kind of where we're at now. But before we get there, one of the goals I had for the job, I guess I should say, when I came up here was, I want to learn everything. I want to learn how to do guest services. I want to learn how to do the front desk. I want to learn how to do bookings. I want to learn the back end of the business. I want to learn some housekeeping. I want to learn some maintenance. I want to learn how to run a resort from the inside to the out, because learning all those skills is only going to be beneficial long term. And as I had said in 2020, when I kind of took that oath to be as far outside my comfort zone as possible, one of my dreams always has been to figure out a way to build a lifestyle that allows me to spend part of the year in the US working and then also travel. And I've had opportunities and kind of gone through the process of trying to be like, okay, how do I become one of those like digital nomads where I'm just like working remote all over the world? Or now with this opportunity, I am here in the US for most of the year, but then I do and have gotten the opportunity to travel like I've wanted to. And frankly, this is the closest I've ever been my entire life to that kind of lifestyle, closer than I've ever been. And talk about like what a place to be. Like, this is my office for 6 months out of the year. It's incredible. Like, I love it so much. And that's what's interesting, is I kind of knew that within the very first like couple weeks or like the month of being up here. I was just like, man, I think I finally found a job that like I have passion for. And that's the big thing. And we're going to get to that later, because that's kind of something that I'm struggling with right now with the different opportunities that have been given to me. Is I will take full advantage of opportunities. I will succeed in those opportunities. But am I passionate in the work I'm doing with those opportunities. And I am just someone who, if I don't really have a deep passion for it, I really struggle to enjoy it or see the long term in that opportunity. So, anyways, end of September, the folks who own this resort, they offer me a position at their company. Sweet, let's do it. That gives me work in the summer. What it means is I move back down to the cities. Okay, let's figure that out. The person I was living with in 2023, 2024 was a friend of mine that I knew from high school. She and I had been friends now over 10 years. Now it's been 10 years. I think it's 10 years now. But we knew each other we were good friends in high school, kind of lost touch in college, and then reconnected after she bought a house, and we were roommates for a couple of years. Well, strangely enough, before I left for Ludlow's to work up here in August of 2024, I don't know how you say it, became more than friends. And that then progressed into a relationship, which I don't know how much I mean, I kind of have to talk about because it's a huge part of the last 18 months. The big points I'll say is I am super, super, super grateful just for the opportunity. I mean, this girl, I've known her for 10 years. I've had a crush on her. I mean, probably since I ever first met her. Her and I went to prom together in high school, you know, and I've always really liked her. And, you know, having the chance to be in a relationship with her was an opportunity of a lifetime, and something I will never take for granted. And even now that it is over, you know, there is a lot that I am just so grateful for. I learned so much from her. You know, and there was a lot of growth that came from that. On the other side, though, as relationships go, there's a lot of hard parts that come with relationships, and this one was no stranger to that. A lot of very challenging things, but I always say, and I always try to put myself in the mindset and the mind frame of being grateful for the experience and everything that came from that experience. Yes, there were really good moments. Yes, there were really bad moments. There were hard days. But I'm grateful for all of them because there's growth that comes from all of it. Just because there's bad aspects of an experience doesn't mean that, like, it was a bad experience. It just was part of the experience. So I moved back to the cities November of 2025, and I'm like, well, where am I going to live? Well, I moved back in with my roommate, which is now going to be my girlfriend. Which at the time, we were just, you know, roommates that weren't dating, but also just not roommates. Whatever. You get the point. Messy. A little bit. But fun. So I get back to the cities, and it's kind of funny because all my friends are like, so I thought you moved away to work at a resort. I'm like, I did. And they're like, so now you're back here working? Correct. And what are you doing? Well, I work for this commercial real estate company. Okay, doing what? Yeah, I don't know. Okay. And pretty much what happened is I got to the office that they had in the cities, and that first off season, I was given the opportunity to get my real estate license. So when I got to the office, I was like, what am I going to be doing here at this like commercial real estate office? Hold on. By the way, I'm going to bring us inside because it is getting cold. I'm starting to get way too chilled. But so I get to the office in the Twin Cities, and I'm like, all right, so what exactly are we going to be doing here at this commercial real estate company? I don't really understand, but pretty much what they told me when I started. Also, give me 1 second. Let me figure out a good spot to put this. Little break in the action, eh? Wonder if I can put it in here. I'm having a hard time here. I don't know. Now you're just looking at me. Don't look at me. I'm gonna put you that way. Let's just try this. Maybe I'll kind of just pace and talk. How's this look? How's that look? Cool? There's a lot of glare in the back, but... So, I get down to the office in November of 2025, and they tell me that they want me to get my real estate license, and they would reimburse me for the whole thing. I'm like, wow, that's really generous. So I go through the process of getting my real estate license, which was interesting because that was probably one of the first times since college that I really was in a state of like learning and studying. And it was hard. It was a lot, but my goal with a lot of things like that is I want to do it once and I want to not have to do it again. So I made damn sure that through that whole real estate training course, it was going to be a one and done deal. I didn't want to study for all those, it was ultimately like two full months of studying pretty hard. I wanted to make sure that I took that test and I passed because I didn't want to do it again. Because, again, I'm very grateful for the real estate license. I also have 30 hours of training I need to complete between now and like 3 weeks to continue having my license. But, when it comes to education and free education, I don't care what it is. Why would I ever turn it down? Was I super passionate about learning all that was included in that real estate training course to get my license? No, it was kind of brutal. It was kind of like pulling teeth, but I did it. I got it first try, got the license. Okay. Got reimbursed for it. Great. One of the things that I said though, when I got offered the job to come back to the cities, tying back to what I said before, September, move up to Ludlows, make the most money I'd ever made in my life. What did I decide to do? I'm going to invest into myself. There's this travel program that I've been following for a very long time called Wander Expeditions. And I wanted to go on one of their trips. So I spent, I think it ended up being close to like 10 grand, but I came up with this whole travel plan to go back to West Africa, to start in Sierra Leone, and then I was going to fly north to the Gambia and go 9 countries all the way down the coast to finish in Benin and join 2 of those travel programs along the way. So when I got offered this job in the cities, I said, hey, that's great. I will come back to the cities, but I want to go on this trip. And I was really curious to be like, where are they going to say? And their response was, sounds good. Really? You sure? Okay. So I'm back in the cities in November, studying for my real estate license. I knew that I also wanted to do something out of the Walk for a Child event that happened in 2024. Now, Walk for a Child as a program, my whole kind of idea and vision for it long term is it's an organization that doesn't really have any interest in building any like projects that have to be managed on the ground in Sierra Leone or any of the countries that we do. It's more so like an experiential learning program that allows youth or really anyone from that country that we run the program in to join along on these long expedition hikes and have the experience of being in community and doing something physically, mentally, and spiritually challenging with your peers. And that's what Walk for a Child is. That's what it was in 2024. We had 30 young kids from the ages of 30 and to 18 or even under who joined us on this walk, and like hearing their stories and just like how inspired they were from that experience was awesome. But I also see the opportunity with doing these Walk for a Child events of some fundraising. I don't really have much interest in fundraising unless it's in kind of the moment of doing it. Because again, fundraising is, I don't know. I mean, this is my opinion, but I think fundraising is kind of like a professional way of just begging for money. And it's a revolving door, it's a never-ending door, and it's a lot to manage. So with Walk for a Child, if I'm going to do any kind of fundraising, I want to make sure that it's done either during the event while we're walking, whenever those walks happen, or maybe it's a one single event after. But any money that we raise from those experiences or from those fundraisers is given to someone within the community that we have a relationship with, someone who has a very good connection and touch with that community, and someone that we trust to manage the money and the project, whatever it is, so that I can step away and not have to be checking in, managing things like that, because I got stuff to do. I got things to get done here in America. I'm trying to balance all these projects. I don't have time to manage a project or a business in West Africa. So to tie back then to 2025, I had come up with a goal, and I've spoke about him before, but my buddy Mike, who runs a collective called Akasha Savita out of Mankato, Minnesota, which has now expanded into Minneapolis, we had the idea of doing a fundraiser event, what we called Rave for Charity. We ran that event, and I'm so grateful for Mike to be open to the idea. And again, we set a goal, we figured out the logistics, we executed. We ended up raising $700 that night, and then I think on top of it, there was some other donations that we gathered and gained, and then I think I actually had to end up putting in like $400 myself. But again, the big takeaway from that and doing that fundraiser was any fundraisers we do in the future, there can't be a set goal of we need to make, I think this was like $1,600 and we came up short by about $400, so we got $1,200. Well, if our goal is $1,600 and we only got $1,200, who's going to pay that other $400? Well, I am. So in the future, if we do these kind of fundraisers, there's no really set amount that we're going for, because I don't want to be caught high and dry having to, spend a bunch of extra money. But what the fundraiser was for is we did Walk for a Child in 2024 in Liberia, walking from Liberia to Sierra Leone, the city of Monrovia, all the way up to the city of Bo. There's a kid in Liberia named Wendell. Wendell is kind of the guy in Liberia that if anyone travels to Liberia, he is the one that people go through. He takes them on tours. He's kind of the tourism face of the country. And he runs a organization over there that builds water wells. And his goal was in and I'm forgetting the name of it, I should know it. The neighborhood in Monrovia that it's a huge slum, and it's really, honestly, like very brutal living conditions. But he had a goal of like building like 25 water wells, which he accomplished in 2025. But I had reached out to him because I met him when I was there in 2024 for the Walk for a Child event. And I told him, I said, I want to build a water well for Walk for a Child. And so me and Mike in December 2024 with Akasha Savita, we ran a fundraiser event, Rave for a Charity, got $700. I made up the difference. December and January, I was still continuing to study for my real estate course, while also really focusing in on making music. I skipped over this part, but I'll get back to it before we move to 2025. When I got up here to Ludlows, I started working on a song that then I released in October, and I named the song after the name of the lake. I named it Vermilion. And I could kind of go in depth about it, but again, this thing is already almost an hour long, so I'll kind of start getting a little quicker with the things I'm talking about. But that song that I released in October of 2024, that song took off. It was my first song to ever reach 30,000 plays. I think now it sits at like 45,000 plays. it was kind of my first song that really, really hit. And what was cool is my whole intention of writing that song was to kind of tell the story of my experience here in the fall being at Ludlows, living on an island, hearing the different animals and the birds and things like that, and creating a soundscape that told that story. And it resonated with a lot of people. People really liked it. And I think it started to kind of create a theme and a soundscape for my project. So tying back then to the start of the new year. So January of 2025, I was still in the country, and I'm trying to think of anything. I don't think there was anything super specific. Let me see. I wonder if I left my phone outside. I'll be right back. I don't know what to do. Oh, it's right here. All right, I'm back. January of 2025. Let's see what we have, if anything, because I don't think a whole lot. Nothing much. Prepping for the trip in February of 2025, which was, kind of my biggest adventure to date. And I've been to Sierra Leone, I think 5 or 6 times now. And from being there all those different times, the only time that I've been to Sierra Leone and I haven't been doing some kind of work, in a sense, was the first time I was ever there. Since then, I've been there building and doing things like Walk for a Child, which is great, but those trips are, it's not a vacation, never. It's, I very much believe there is a difference between traveling and a difference between vacationing. Going to Sierra Leone, going to West Africa, that is traveling, very much so. It is not really a vacation. There are plenty of places in those countries that you can go and have a vacation. But the way I like to do it, man, I'm there for the adventure. Like the true adventure. Let's go have some crazy experiences. That's traveling. So I had this idea of joining these 2 travel programs, Wander Expeditions. And, what I had thought is, okay, so I'm going to go over there and do these group trips, the travel groups. But before, if I'm in that region, I might as well go to Sierra Leone. And I started out in Sierra Leone, and it was really fun. It was the first time, like I said, since 2020 that I'd been in the country, not working. And really all we did is like travel around the country. Me and my best friend Hindalo, he now runs a fishing business out of this community right along the ocean in the southern part of Sierra Leone. So we get to the country, we head down to the fishing village, and then we leave and we head all the way up north in the country, which is like a 7 to 10 hour travel. And then we spend some time up in the north of the country hiking a mountain, and then we come back to the capital city. And just like the experiences that Hindle and I have had is truly like it's just like the definition of adventure. Like someday I hope to write some kind of book or have someone help me write a book of the adventures of Hindalo and Dustin, because the things that him and I have done are just ridiculous. Like if I were to tell all the stories of the things that we have done and experienced, it would be like, you sure this is real? And it's like, yeah, but I'm not even sure myself, but I lived it. But I was in Sierra Leone for, let's say 2 weeks. And then I flew north to the Gambia. And my travel group with Wander Expeditions was not starting in the Gambia. It was starting in Guinea-Bissau. So I had to figure out how to get from the Gambia through southern Senegal into Guinea-Bissau, which was the fun challenge. And I ended up getting, public transport. I got one morning in the Gambia, I got a private escort from a major in the military, picked me up at like 5 a.m. It was him, his M16, and me. Very interesting experience. I won't go a ton into depth into that whole experience because I did shoot a lot of content when I was over there that I haven't fully finished up, but it will be something that I will get back going on the YouTube channel at some point, you know. But what I will say is the biggest and most favorite part of that whole experience being in West Africa, I was there for 6 weeks and I did 9 countries, is my goal of going over there wasn't really to focus on shooting content and shooting YouTube videos. I do think I ended up shooting about 7 YouTube videos when I was over there, but I really focused on working on music, especially in Sierra Leone with all the downtime I had, and while solo traveling all the way up to Guinea-Bissau, and even with those travel groups. What was cool is this was the first time in my life that I was actually able to be abroad and have the wherewithal to actually know how to like produce music and finish songs. Up to that point, I was very dependent upon tutorials and just like wasn't at a point production wise where I could like really figure it out without like some additional help. And I think I wrote, for sure, finished 2 songs while I was in Africa. And one of those songs was a remix I started in Senegal, which is now still to this day my most popular song, which has almost 75,000 streams. Like, it's crazy. It's like I was in West Africa writing dubstep, and I'm like, there is no one in this region writing dubstep. I'm the only one doing this. And I'm like, this is crazy. So yeah, I had a really, 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 I'm not even gonna say good, or I'm just gonna say I had a really big experience in West Africa, because there were also parts of that experience that were really bad and really challenging. But that's also what comes with traveling. It's not a vacation. There's highs, there's lows, there's all kinds of things. You know, my relationship really suffered when I was over there. That was really challenging to try and manage that while being 5,000 miles away. And then in these travel groups, I met a lot of new people. And I met this one friend who I'm actually going to be seeing in a month. Her name is Laura. She's from Germany. And her and I like hit it off right away. It was just like long lost buddies. I was just like, dude, like we're just such great friends. I feel like we have known each other forever. And she was only on my first expedition through 4 countries in West Africa. And then she flew to Ethiopia, and then she was back home in Germany. But we've stayed in contact over the last, that was February of 2025. And we are now in a month, less than a month, in a couple weeks, we're going to be going to travel in Greece together. So very grateful for her for keeping in contact and yeah, creating another travel experience for the 2 of us. I think it'll be really fun. She's a really great girl and a really great friend. And I love nothing more in life than just experiences. I think experiences are fantastic. And sharing experiences with other people, especially things that both of you haven't ever done, I mean, those memories just last for a lifetime. When we talk about value and depth, it's like there's no monetary value that could ever be placed on the experiences had traveling with someone. It's a 1 in a million type of experience. So February, I'm over in West Africa. We did end up building the water well. That was really cool. There will be a YouTube video that comes from that. I get back into the country in March. And when I get back, Akasha Savita, the music collective that I had played for and am a big fan of, which I actually now kind of work for them, they threw their first ever show in Minneapolis in March of 2025. I ended up going to that. It was a huge, crazy event. Like, they packed it out. And this was also right around the time, I think right before that show is when I released the remix that I wrote in Senegal. And it had shortly afterwards started to kind of it was weird because I went to that show and there was a lot of people that recognized me as Manatee, as an artist, more so than Dustin. And I was like, that's crazy. Really cool, but really crazy, really weird. To be recognized as a individual by, your artist name, by your persona, more so than just me as Dustin. It was, and it still is. Like, I still go out sometimes, especially at shows and stuff, and it's like people know me as Manatee more so than they might even know me as Dustin. It's like, that's weird. Really cool, but it's a weird human experience. So that was March. April was then kind of getting ready to head up to the resort for the season. The big change in this last season was the lady that worked the front desk here at the resort had been here for 30 years. I think last year would have been year 30 for her. And just with the changing of softwares and ownership over the last couple of years, it was one of those where it's like, you know what, you're getting close to retirement, you go your way, we're going to do our thing. I won't say a ton on it, just for my own sake, but the truth of the matter is just business is, if there's one thing I've learned about business and working in different companies, is that business is all encompassing of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it is apparent in every industry I've been a part of, every job I've worked, every company I've been a part of. There's a good chunk of all of it everywhere, and that's all I'm really going to say on it, is just there's so much good and excitement that comes from business and the different changes, but there's also a lot of challenging things and figuring out how do you work together as a team. And it's, and being in businesses that are like really big into investing into projects versus businesses that are like very brick and mortar, or businesses that are completely online, like the logistics thing. It's all very weird. And then there's the ugly part of it, where it's like sometimes business isn't always the best. It's sometimes things work for the company or people, and sometimes it doesn't. And yeah, it's interesting. So that's what I'll say. But anyways, instead of doing guest services this past summer, I was working the front desk and learning the entire brand new point of sale system that we had for the resort, doing all the bookings, doing all the reservations, learning the back end of the business, doing the social media for the business. Really great experience, and now what's really cool is in the past with the new ownership, I'd say the biggest issue in the past couple of years was there was not everyone was playing for the same team. The analogy that I use is, this new family came and bought a resort that was owned by the same family for 80 something years. At the time that they bought it, there was a group of people who had been working here for 15 to 30 years, very long time employees. Typically what happens in these types of like big commercial real estate transactions of buying these big businesses, resorts, things like that, is a new company comes in, they buy the resort, the business, whatever, and they just clear house, start fresh, because truthfully, it's kind of the analogy of it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. And that is true, very much so, I will say. And that has been apparent here. So I have said that the biggest issue that we've seen in the last couple of years is a bunch of people wearing different jerseys and trying to figure out, okay, what team are you playing for? What team are you playing for? The good thing now this year with the team that we have built for this resort is every single person we have here, I can see it from a mile away. Oh, you're wearing the same jersey as the team I'm on. We're all on the same team, which in theory is a crazy concept. It's like, we're all working together. Crazy. But again, as I've said, I've seen it here, I've seen it elsewhere, that there is a lot of times people working within a company, within a business and stuff, and you're not on the same page and you're not working towards the same goal, and it creates issues. It's very difficult, things like that. So I did front desk April, May, June, July, August. And then the college kids we had working guest services down the docks. We had one college kid, one high school kid. Well, they had to go back to school. So we need someone on the dock. So I moved. At the time, I didn't live on the island last year. I lived at a house offshore. And I lived there. I would commute to work. It was only about 15 minutes. Again, I'm living deep in the woods. It's great. It's a cool experience. But then I moved onto the island fall of 2026. Now, a couple things that happened between March of 2025 to fall of 2025. I move up to Ludlows. I start a brand new position here, learning a brand new point of sale system. The big thing is that my relationship just falls apart. Me and my partner at the time, we end up breaking up. And all the while, I am, for the first time in my life, consistently releasing music. I was releasing a song a month from pretty much September of 2025 all the way through September of 2024 through July of 2025. And like I said, tying back to the beginning of this video, my songs used to get 100 streams. I was like, that's crazy. Every single song that I've released, any mix, any song, whatever have you, every single one hits 1,000 now, like 1,000 streams minimum. And it's like, that's crazy, you know? And so that's where I'll get to it here shortly. But I've been struggling with music a lot lately. And again, I don't measure the success of my project on the analytics of how many streams, this, that, or the other thing, but it is, you know, something that is important, and it is a metric of growth for the project. And I've been very consistent with consistently getting streams and follows and growing that project, which is really exciting because I've been, you know, if you know me, you know I've been working on this for a very, very long time. So yeah, we go through the summer. Me and my girlfriend break up in July of 2025. This happens days before a show that I perform in Minneapolis. One of my biggest shows. I played with one of my buddies at this venue called the Green Room in Minneapolis. And we crushed, had a really good time. But, you know, I played on a Friday and I had gotten broken up with on a Wednesday. So it was, you know, I drove 3.5 hours down to the cities. Hey, this is not working out. We're done. Okay. And now I got to go perform in Minneapolis. Okay. All right, great. And then I turn around and the next morning I drive right up back here and I'm working. Okay. So what happened? I felt like I fell into, I don't know if I want to say depression. I had a really, really, really hard time July and August. You know, in the way that I am as a person, I go all in on all the things that I do, whether it be a project of my own, like music or content creation, or I want to go build this organization overseas, or this company I work for, or a relationship. Like, I go all in. And if it doesn't work out, it leads me, you know, many times over to be feeling kind of really let down and just like really hurt, you know, and I don't put any, again, I say this with, you know, I always say that I give my ex a ton of credit for having the strength to put an end to our relationship, because the truth is like, I knew it deep down. I knew things weren't good for a while. I kind of knew things weren't good from January of 2025, and we went all the way through July. You know, but I kept compensating, and I kept thinking like, you know what, we can work through this. Like, let's keep trying. And that's just kind of how I am. I think it's one of my weaknesses, but I give her credit for saying like, no, this is not working. Because I don't know if I would have the strength to do that. There is definitely a timeline of reality that in this current moment, we're still in that relationship trying to navigate and figure it out. And me trying to put the pieces together when the pieces just will never fit. So I give them credit for putting an end to the relationship. It'd be nice to say that's just where things kind of ended and we went our separate ways. Totally not the case, because as I get near the end of the season this year, I go back to work at the company, the commercial real estate company that owns this resort. And, you know, where I was living for the last 3 years was with my roommate and then girlfriend. And now we're broken up. Shit, I gotta find somewhere to live. Well, I have a buddy I can live with. Great. You know, we agreed upon a rent amount, things like that. And the problem is he lives like down the block from my ex. So again, not gonna go too much into it, but what I will say is, lesson learned. After a relationship is over, it is probably not a wise decision to live in such close proximity to your ex, just because of the fact that it is difficult to find space and time to move on in a healthy way. That's all it is. It's just too easy, too comfortable, too convenient to just be 5 minutes down the road. That's not helping me heal. That's not helping you heal. That's not helping us heal. You know, neither of us are at fault, but we got to do what's best for each other. And that's kind of the point I'm at now in March of 2026 is, you know, I've been friends with this person for 10 years, but it's just, I think it needs to, the Band-Aid needs to be ripped off, plain and simple. And I've been thinking this for a while. That's just like, the Band-Aid needs to be ripped off. Need to just like no contact for months. And then come back and see, you know, can this be friends again? I don't know. Who knows? Some other stuff that happened throughout the summer as well was I played my first out-of-state festival in South Dakota. That was really fun. I played that over Labor Day weekend. It was a really cool experience. Wasn't the biggest crowd, but it was really cool to play, start performing, and by the end I had a decent sized crowd and be able to connect with the people out there. So that was a really cool experience. And then, yeah, I got back to the cities in November. And that kind of brings me up to, you know, this point where, you know, and I'm hour and 11 minutes and the battery might be dying. So we're going to try to wrap this up. Let's see, 22%. The point I am at now is I feel very conflicted, but there's good things that are coming. I feel conflicted in the sense that, like, I was given an opportunity this fall to head the entire marketing department of this company. When I got there in November, I was trained in under someone who had been doing the job for 5 years and was very much, again, someone I would consider a professional at the job that they do. They were going on maternity leave. So I had November and December to learn all that they knew. This job of marketing, being a marketing director, and I think of any company of a marketing director, there's a lot of moving parts, like a ton of moving parts. The way I describe it is I feel like I got there in November and it's like, okay, here's the 35 different things I do. And of these different 35 things, here's all the intricacies of every single one of those things that I do. And it's all like 1 to 2 pages worth of a document that explains the steps in it. Holy shit. It's a lot to learn. It's a lot to figure out. And it's a lot of, again, doing the little things right. And if there's one thing I've learned about myself in these kind of office-based jobs is I move sometimes too fast. I go too fast. I got to slow down. And when I move too fast, I make a lot of little errors. And a lot of these jobs, like the logistics job and this marketing job, it is all about the little errors, mitigating those, making sure that those things aren't happening. You know, we are making these high-level marketing portfolios and packets and promoting these high-level properties that are selling for millions and millions of dollars. It's got to be right, not for us, but for everybody and for the entire company and the people we're representing, this whole thing. So it's a big deal. There are aspects of doing this job now for the last, November, December, January, February, 5 months or so. There's aspects I really like. Part of the aspect of this job, of this company, is we work 3 days in office, 2 days from home, working remotely. Over Christmas, we get like 2 weeks to work remotely. I've been up here at Ludlow's for 2 weeks. I've been working remotely. So it's, again, there's like these aspects of my life that are, it's like the pieces are being pushed across the board. Like, this is where I was, this is where I want to be. The dream is eventually to be at a point where I can be, working, making US money, but then able to travel and be outside the country, but more so like finding a good balance of time to travel and make art. Okay. So this job, there's a lot of aspects that have been pushing me further to the goal of being like able to travel and work remotely. In December of 2025, me and Akasha Savita threw the third ever Manatee and Friends event. It wasn't solely a Manatee and Friends event. It was a Akasha event with a collective in Arizona, partnered with Manatee and Friends. But essentially what we did is we went down to Arizona, Tempe, Arizona. We rented out an entire venue. We hired a headliner. We hired other artists. And we went down and we threw a show in Tempe. And what was interesting is that night there was a venue in the same city that had arguably a bigger artist play. And we sold for electronic dance music, specifically like bass music, dubstep, that night in that city of Tempe, Arizona. We, as the out-of-town crew, we sold the most tickets out of any event in the city that night. Crazy. We crushed. It was so nuts. And I got to play and perform for the biggest crowd that I'd ever played for. Probably like, I'd say for sure like 300 people, maybe 300 to 400 people. But it was huge. It was really cool. It was also really nice to... I had been releasing consistently for almost an entire year, and to be able to kind of play out all those songs to a big crowd. And it was also like one of my first times of, showing up to a new city and people recognizing me through my music and stuff. I remember I went to the bathroom after my set, and there was one guy that I met who said that, he was like, oh, I really like this song of yours. I'm like, you know my songs? I'm like, that's crazy. And then there was some other couple I met in the crowd that they're like, we've been listening to you for, a couple years. I'm like, a couple years? I'm like, I've even been listening to my music that long. Like, what do you mean? Like, that's so cool. So that was really cool. I did a road trip. That was the fun part of it, is I drove from Minnesota all the way down to Arizona. And I was working remotely along the whole way, which, again, I've started to come to realize that as you get closer to different goals that you set forth for yourself, when your reality begins to change to become the reality of those goals. Does that make sense? I don't know. When you set a goal and you get closer to achieving that goal, the reality that you find yourself in very much falls in line of the analogy of the grass is not always greener on the other side. Now, I'm careful with saying this because this is not me complaining, but this is just me more reflecting in my experience, in that I had always dreamed of being able to travel and work remotely. I got the opportunity to, but I also needed to have some grace on myself because that was my first experience ever really doing that. Plus, I was training in on a position that was brand new to me. There was a lot to learn, and it's a little more difficult to learn that abroad just through email and things like that. But overall, the experience was fantastic. I learned a ton. Driving down to Arizona was such a beautiful road trip. Getting up early in the morning at 3 a.m., driving till about 7 a.m., then hopping on my computer and sending off emails and doing my marketing job during the day at a McDonald's in the middle of fucking Oklahoma. And then at night, okay, workday's done. Hop in the car. Let's drive from Oklahoma all the way to Amarillo, Texas. Next morning, you wake up in Amarillo, Texas. Cool, let's go to the McDonald's in town. I'm going to sit here for 5-6 hours. And then we're going to drive all the way to New Mexico. I mean, just crazy cool experience. So, and then we get down to Tempe, Arizona, and that was that show was so cool. After Tempe, Arizona, I brought my two friends who were on the road trip up to Sedona, Arizona, which if you don't know about Sedona, Google it. It's incredible. One of the ladies that I met in West Africa was this lady by the name of Michelle. She is, I don't know, maybe in her 50s. She's like my mom's age. But she lives in Sedona, Arizona, and she travels the world. And Sedona is not a cheap place to live. So Michelle for sure did well for herself and owns a house in Sedona, which ain't an easy thing to do. So we go down to her place. It's insane. Her whole house is, 1, spotless, 2, decorated with all this like art from all over the world. I just was like, yo. Yeah, dude, Michelle is like, just like she's like one of the coolest people I've met. So I spent a couple days in Sedona with Michelle. What's funny? It's like I have these different relationships and friendships with people who are very, different in age. Like Hindalo's in his late 40s. I'm in my late 20s. Michelle is probably my mom's age. She'll probably in her 50s. And I'm in my late 20s. I'm like, you are some of my best friends. You know, it's just the way it is. But I got back from Arizona, and then I realized that I had 2 weeks to work remotely for Christmas. So I was like, shit, if I'm going to be sitting at home for 2 weeks and working remotely, I'm going to get back on the road. So I turned right around and I drove all the way from Minneapolis down to Florida, Tampa, and spent a week down in Tampa, visiting and swimming with the manatees, setting my goals for the new year. I went on a swim with the manatees. I went to a show by myself. It was really cool, you know, and it was, again, it's just, I'm getting closer to those aspects of being able to get closer to the life that I've dreamed of having all these years. But again, with that, the biggest takeaway that I have now sitting in March of 2026 is I'm almost to the end of this period of working in the commercial real estate side of the company. You know, and there are aspects of this marketing job that I have enjoyed, but the biggest things is I feel like there's a lot of moving parts, and I feel like that some days my days just like go on and on and on. The biggest thing in this off season, the off season of fall of 2025 to spring of 2026, is I have not been able to find a routine and any kind of sense of really good consistency. And I am a creature of habit, and I really like my routines. And I've had a hard time finding that. This has then come at the cost of I've been really off music. You know, I wrote a song and I released it in January. I have a song coming out in a couple weeks. So it's like I'm still, you know, and I released a mix. So it's like I have 3 releases this year, which again, I gotta have grace on myself because I'm like, that's great, you know, but I feel like I'm not doing enough. Pretty much where I'm going to leave this at, because I've been yapping, and yeah, I don't know. It probably hasn't even been easy to follow. I want to see what I'm at percentage wise. 8%. 8%. This thing's going to die here soon. So let me leave you with this. I am very grateful for where I'm at in life. The last 18 months since my last check-in, a lot has happened. A lot has changed, as does for every single one of us in our own ways. The interesting part coming up is going to be this season. I am now the head of guest services for this resort. Huge opportunity to build and craft my team of guest service, build and craft the different aspects of this business, to grow as a professional, to make really, really good money for the first time in my life. And then comes next fall, which who knows what comes, you know. That's the biggest thing, is I'm grateful for these opportunities, but I don't feel the passion. And that's where I feel like I've been burnt out for a very long time, and I'm having a hard time trying to find energy for my projects. I haven't been posting consistently on social media like I like to. I haven't been releasing YouTube videos. I haven't been filming or things like that. So this job of being the head of guest services, I mean, I'm going to have 6 days a week, 12 to 14 hour days. And it really is up to me to create routine, to create systems that allow me to consistently keep working on my craft. Because the whole reason why I left the logistics job in 2024 was to take a job where I was outside, not sitting behind a desk all day, and able to work on my music and my craft and film. And I've done really well here at this company, at the resort. But then I find myself back in these opportunities of kind of sitting behind a computer every day on spreadsheets, working for someone else's goals and dreams. And yes, there's a lot of opportunities that have been given to me. And like I said, the pieces are getting closer to where I want to be. But I feel burnt out. I feel really burnt out. I feel really tired. I feel like I've put my dreams and goals on the back burner this off season. I worry about that. I worry about, getting back on track with my music and releasing and not spending as much time even DJing as I used to. It's just like, yeah, I got to find ways to get back to my goals, my projects, my processes, I'm very grateful for all the opportunities here, but it's funny how it works where it's, I take an opportunity to make time and space for the things I want to do, and then I start succeeding at that new job, and which is fantastic, lots of great opportunity, but now it kind of seems to come at the cost of, now my dreams seem to be a little bit more on the back burner, just as much so, if not even more than they were at the logistics job. So it's like, how the fuck did I get here? And where do I go from here? So we'll see. My biggest goal, though, is, like I said, a couple weeks from now, I take my mom to Greece. So I will definitely be shooting some YouTube videos there, and hopefully spending this summer working and focusing on my projects, getting all those videos made. I have videos from 2025 West Africa. I have my whole video series from Pakistan in 2022, and I will have these videos from Greece. Plus, I really want to start just doing this kind of stuff. An hour, 25-minute video is not going to be the norm. I hope not, because that's just too much. But I needed to do this for me. For me, I needed to do this, and I'm glad I did. I don't even know myself if I'll go back and watch this. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But more than anything, I'm glad that I just took the time to reflect, to speak, to not work. I've been, I came up here for 2 weeks to get out in the woods and relax and catch up on sleep. And I've been sitting at that goddamn computer for 12 hours a day trying to catch up on all the fucking work that I need to do. And I'm losing my goddamn mind, I feel like. It's just I can't get ahead. I feel burnt out. And I do it to myself. It's like, that's the big thing, is I do a lot of this to myself. There's no one really to be upset or, frustrated. And that's not really what I'm feeling, but it's just, the only person putting these tasks and projects on themselves is me. But that is also, I'm at 2%. That's all I know. So we're going to figure out a better system into this new coming year. Thank you for watching. Sorry it's all over the place. If you made it this far, shit, good on you. But I'll check in another time. If you did make it this far, I don't know, say something. But in the comments or whatever it is. But thanks for watching.